Well, as it turns out, we do have decades of scientific research on high carbohydrate diets. Now, Mark's choice of labeling it the sugar diet, of course, is Mark Bell. He's the ultimate promoter.
Great businessman and marketer. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great businessman and marketer. And then he purposely pokes people in the eye talking about gummy bears and stuff like that, when in fact he's eating salads and fruit and the like. Just like you said, you went high fruit. Um, we have decades of research on high carbohydrate diets. The blue zones are a perfect example, although I think that that entire blue zone genre is heavily influenced by poor birth records, unfortunately. Uh, but, Okinawa was at one point, I think, 85% carbs. Vegan diets generally tend to be somewhat north of 80% carbohydrates, um, and have shown, to be excellent for health span and lifespan. So a high carbohydrate diet's nothing new. We had some research back in I think it was I talked more. I was when I talked to Mark, I had done a little background step, and I was able to mention the names of the researchers. But I think as far back as the 1940s or 50s, we had the rice diet, which was reversing diabetes. Here's the thing, and I, on many of my podcasts and seminars, have referenced literature showing that, and this is the author's conclusion, that 90 to 99% of health benefits are realized strictly from weight loss itself, irrespective of diet. I talked about this in terms of the McDonald's diet, the 7-Eleven diet, the Twinkie diet. And of course, usually when people are stitching me on Instagram, they stop right there. On Tim Bilyeu's podcast, which had millions of views, or Tom Bilyeu's podcast had millions of views. I had mentioned that, and it got stitched all over the place, and people were screaming and yelling that I was promoting a McDonald's diet. But my very next statement is I would never recommend a McDonald's diet for a variety of reasons: high cholesterol, low micronutrients, satiety, absence of benefits for that. But nonetheless, the fact remains that the weight loss itself is the primary driver of the health benefits. Reduced blood pressure, reduced lipids, reduced blood sugars. All of those things improve with the weight loss itself, irrespective of diet. And then, of course, there's all sorts of different restrictive diets: carnivore, vegans, restrictive. It's just any elimination diet. There's only 3 types of diet. That's, calorie restriction, time restriction, and food restriction. Dietary restriction, we call it CR, TR, and DR. And dietary restriction would be eliminating any, or drastically reducing, such as keto, down to, 50 grams a day of carbs, or vegan or carnivore, and eliminating a bunch of foods. It's not uncommon. This has been going on for decades, reducing particular macros or eliminating paleo, just eliminating, everything that a caveman didn't eat. There's no independent benefit of those diets. We've seen this with intermittent fasting. It's been argued back and forth. Autophagy, cancer reduction, all these other claims are in evidence now with at least a decade or more of very specific research comparing these diets to each other, independent of the weight loss, other than maybe keto for people suffering from what is that? And so many thoughts going on in my head right now. I'm sorry, but there's no independent benefit, no specific benefit. And if you've followed, as you have, a lot of these influence, Dr. Peter T is one who has evolved over the years. He used to be a big carbohydrate insulin model guy, a la Gary Taubes, and then he was a big keto guy, and then he was a big intermittent fasting guy. And now, all these years later, after the evidence has become painfully clear, he's like, independent of a calorie deficit, there doesn't seem to be any magical specific benefit to any of these diets. So I wanted to start with that because I did a podcast with Mark, and I think it's funny, actually, and I haven't really, built out this line of thought. You just asked me, but I've kind of been thinking the other day. I was just thinking to myself, it's just laughable watching all these keto and carnivore folks. And look, I'm a big red meat guy, and I'm a use the best diet that you'll follow guy. I've always suggested that the best diet's the one you'll follow, irrespective of whether it's keto or intermittent fasting, what have you. But these people who are religious about these, their Instagram name includes carnivore or keto or fasting queen or whatever it is. uh, these people are just having a meltdown over Mark's diet, claiming it's going to be unhealthy, this, that, or the other, especially the people that are into the whole low carb keto thing. There's a host of different names that you know. I won't talk about them right now, but and it's just hilarious because they even at this point now, because we have the evidence, they even made up a category of people who somehow were immune from elevated LDL and cardiovascular disease because they were otherwise healthy. That was the lean mass hyperresponder, which we had to listen to for 4 or 5 years now. We've had to listen to Feldman and Nick Norwitz and just proclaiming that there was this specific group of people who were exempted from cardiovascular disease related to LDL elevation just because they were healthy, because they had a low triglyceride and a high HDL. They completely made it up. They just completely made it up. And now they're just screaming bloody murder because Mark Bell's talking about eating carbohydrates or specifically sugar, but that's really not what it is. And all carbohydrates, whether they're fruits or added sugar, have the exact same pathway for breaking down. You can't tell them apart in the body. And then we've got these people out there like Glucose Goddess screaming about glucose spikes. There's no evidence that normal physiological response to carbohydrate consumption has adverse health effect. And we do have some evidence suggesting that the more robust insulin response to carbohydrate consumption is indicative of a healthier pancreas. So now we're not talking about insulin resistance people, people who have type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, or type 2 diabetes, but that's calorie driven. That's not sugar driven. Aggravating the symptoms of an existing diabetic can certainly be changed with your carbohydrate consumption and should be. But in terms of what causes diabetes, sugar doesn't cause diabetes. Energy toxicity from any calorie and fatty liver disease is driven at twice the rate of sugar by eating saturated fats. So we have all that evidence. And just to cap off the whole lean mass hyperresponder nonsense, which has finally come to an end recently with a study that was commissioned by and conducted by those individuals who made up the whole lean mass hyperresponder farce, turned out that their soft plaque accelerated at 4 times the rate of the normal population. And then they lied about the results. They didn't even declare, they didn't even post the results for what the original, that the study was originally designated to say, and tried to tweak it. And it was a disaster, an absolute disaster. So it's just laughable to me that the keto community and the lean mass hyperresponder folks, I've joked with Mark the other day. I sent him a text. I said, you should call this the lean mass non-responder and just make it up, and then go pay for a study from Harvard to look at people who have been on a low or a high sugar diet for more than 6 months to talk about how great they feel on it and claim that that's evidence, which is what the carnivore Harvard study did. They took people who had been on the carnivore diet for over 6 months and interviewed them. It was simply anecdotes from people whose Instagram had carnivore in their name. No shit, they're going to say that it was fantastic for them. The bias in this stuff, these are the same people who complain about the epidemiological research out there would then, present a study like the Harvard carnivore study. And I'm not against carnivore. I've made recommendations that it's at being the ultimate elimination diet for people who suffer from extreme digestive distress. When you if you want to claim it's any better than any other diet, you have to have evidence to that. And when you want to claim that adverse biomarkers are somehow exempt from disease progression because of your diet, then you need to have evidence for that. And none of these people do have evidence for that. They don't have evidence that their diet is any better long-term for long-term dietary adherence. They don't have any evidence that it somehow usurps, adverse biomarkers, and specifically LDL, as discussed, or increased, prostate cancer exposure or colon cancer exposure from, processed meats, which I think most folks would suggest that it's, processed meats are not part of the carnivore diet. But nonetheless, I'm a big tent guy. I'm more than happy to get them all, as far as to drive weight loss. I'm more than happy to present all the options to folks and see which one they can better adhere to long term. But that doesn't mean you can disregard NAFLD, LDL. And I don't disregard with the sugar diet insulin resistance, but it's just not driven by that. It's driven by calories. And if you're in a calorie deficit and you're an otherwise healthy individual and you choose to utilize a high carb diet, which I would prefer if that was lots of fruits and vegetables over just added sugar. But we have tons of studies, even with fructose, at 200 grams a day, substituting sugar for other calories in the diet, or even substituting fructose for sucrose. We don't see any adverse effects on health outcomes in those human randomized controlled trials from substitutions. So until such time that you could provide me evidence to the contrary, either mechanistically or with biomarkers or human outcomes, I'm inclined to believe that there's absolutely nothing wrong with picking your preferred macronutrient content. The only thing I cautioned Mark about was getting sufficient protein, such as in long fasting trials, we see a loss of muscle tissue. But as we discussed earlier, that's driven more by the training stimulus than it is by protein, presuming you get, a base amount. I suggested to Mark the base amount of that was probably 1.2 grams per kilo, or about 0.6 grams per pound. I thought was kind of the bottom end to optimize. And that's, based on Stu Phillips, 1.2 to 1.6 was kind of the range he thought was more than sufficient. 0.8, not necessarily so. We do see some decrement, in particularly as we age, in terms of anabolic resistance or sarcopenia. But a guy Mark's age who's active and training, I just suggest that he probably didn't need more than 0.6 grams per pound, and that might even be per pound of lean weight. And he's at about 160 pounds of lean weight right now. And so, I told him I didn't think he needed more than 100 grams a day to optimize of protein, to optimize his lean mass retention while dieting, because his goal is to lose extra weight. And that's only 400 calories a day, 100 grams of protein. And sometimes he'll do a fast and not get that protein at all. He'll do like a 3-day fast, but he'll do it with just eating tons of fruit. And again, I don't think fasting imparts any specific, independent benefit than weight loss. If you want to do it, do it. Adding some fruit in there doesn't change anything for me. Whether or not it's officially fasting or not means nothing to me. There's no impact on autophagy or whatever other, buzzword of the day you want to use to try and justify fasting as having some special magical benefit. So I don't care if you eat a protein bar or if you eat a piece of fruit, or we know that calories, the lower the calories, the more weight you're going to lose. Just hold on to lean mass with a sufficient training stimulus, and then don't go too long without sufficient protein in order not to lose too much muscle. But Mark's got muscle to lose. He's more than muscular enough. So I'm not too concerned. So I know that was a bit of it was kind of disjointed, my response there, but I just, as my brain started touching on all these things that people try and claim are problems with Mark's new diet, they just don't have any evidence to, and I think that the alternatives don't present themselves as being any better.
I had somebody message me probably 6 weeks ago about the sugar fast, the sugar diet. Mark Bell. He said, "Did you see what Mark is doing?" And I followed Mark for years. I know he's a great friend of yours, but he's done all the craziest things out there. And I kind of brushed it off at first as, "Oh, that's just Mark. Like, he'll do anything that's extreme, and he's great at it." And then I started to see more about it. And then I saw a conversation with you and him on his YouTube channel. And then I went deeper into it. And then I experimented with it a week ago. And my results were phenomenal. I mean, weight loss like that, it shredded off like 7 pounds in like 2 days. And I'm already fairly lean, visible abs, like probably close to 12, 11% right now. Very visible abs. Strength was good, but it just went like gone. Energy, incredible, like throughout the day. I ruck every day with a 70-pound vest. I knocked a minute off of my mile time rucking just with eating only fruit. Sleep through the roof. I track it on Aura. Now, my strength in the gym did slightly decrease. The workout pumps were incredible, but I noticed my ability to push as much weight dropped in just a week. So those were my results, and I'm excited. I'm going to do it again as I prep for a cruise, just as that kind of final shred. Because what I also noticed is when I reintroduced a lot of carbs and starches back in, it was almost that post-show rebound. Like I filled back up and I looked incredible. So I'm going to do another week doing the Smelly Protocol.